Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game Esoteric series on the MiSTer FPGA DE10 Nano project, more specifically the Nintendo 64 core, and continuing to put the core up against NSO Nintendo 64 emulation. And everyone should be keenly aware right now that we are playing Super Mario 64. If anyone didn't know that, I would be surprised. So we're going to put Super Mario 64 on NSO up against the Nintendo 64 core and MiSTer FPGA to talk about the differences, the improvements on NSO, and where it falls flat. Before we get too far involved, though, do me a huge favor, go down below, hit like and subscribe, and ring that notification bell, definitely helps us out. And if you feel so inclined and want to support the channel, I got a Patreon link down below as well. Now, obviously, there's no more well-known game on Nintendo 64 than Super Mario 64. When this game launched, it became a cultural icon, and it is still played by a ton of people today, and speedrun by others. This is my footage here on the actual MiSTer FPGA side of things, and Andy D and his son, who is a Super Mario 64 speedrunner, helped a little bit on the other side as well, so it is fun to compare. And I will say, at least on the upscale of this game, it does look relatively good in most spots. There's definitely going to be a couple graphical glitches with the improvements, but overall it is a really good looking version of Super Mario 64. But the main issue is, and we'll show you some more close-ups in just a moment, when you actually get into the gameplay, the frame rate can definitely be weird and variable, and there's situations in which you're actually getting some hitching, which is definitely not going to improve the situation whatsoever. This is just not as fluid of an experience for Super Mario 64 as original hardware or MiSTer FPGA, and this game, a 3D platformer, lives and dies by that. And I love the fact that in Andy D's footage, he fell into that pit, and very short you'll see I made the exact same mistake. Basically, it always happens if you're trying to rush through this area, the timing on the global cycle when you first start the level, if you jump the wrong way or miss a jump, you're basically guaranteed to go down that pit. So I love that at least performance-wise, you can screw up the exact same way. But take a look at this seam here on this rock wall. That is clearly visible. It must be a polygon seam, and you can see it run all the way up the side of this actual area. And that is going to be something that we move over the Nintendo 64 core footage is going to be completely gone, and it's also going to be something that is not visible on real hardware. So even though you're getting that upscaled graphical look, you're going to get some graphical glitches. They're not going to be huge, but they're definitely going to be noticeable, and sometimes they are jarring, like that line there, because it is so plainly obvious that it shouldn't be within the actual game. It's definitely not going to interfere with your enjoyment of the title, and some of the upscaling here does look better than real Nintendo 64 footage, but it is just one of those situations. Be aware that you're going to get some of those graphical glitches in there, but really it is the overall control that just doesn't feel as precise on NSO as it does on Nintendo 64 or the FPGA core. And with a 3D platformer, one of the things Nintendo nailed right off the top was the precise movement of Mario. Sure, the camera would fight you now and again because they were just learning how to do cameras in 3D at Nintendo, but honestly they absolutely nailed the movement of Mario and how he actually traverses that 3D space. When you end up in a situation where you have some control issues and some laggy issues, it is a little bit of a bummer. And side by side, it can be a little hard to tell in the footage, but the overall motion cadence of the frames on the NSO version of the game just are not anywhere near as good as the FPGA core. And that again is a big letdown. Honestly, the Super Mario 3D All-Stars version of this game would be the one I'd much rather play if I was going to play anything on Switch, because that seems to be doing a better job, and that's kind of weird to me. I do have a copy of that, and I checked in the background, and honestly it felt like a better version than what you're getting on NSO, so there must be two different implementations there. If you have any ideas of what that might be though, leave me a comment down below. And as we move to Bomb on Battlefield here, again, it's a situation in which the graphical upscale looks really nice. I love how the textures look, I love the models. Because this game is bright, colorful, and cheery, it definitely aids itself with the upscale, even though it really can't do much for the skybox. But again, it is down just overall to the motion clarity in the frames. You're going to be getting a frame rate that really isn't accurate to the original hardware, and that's totally going to screw you up. And after the musical sample, I'll give you some examples of where you can actually see it dropping frames in real time, versus the Nintendo 64 FPGA core, which is doing everything real hardware would do. But go ahead and listen to the music. We're going to do NSO second, core first, and leave me a comment and tell me what you think. Honestly, with every comparison I've done from the FPGA core to NSO, the audio is the one area in which consistently it is good across the board. I really honestly can't hear any difference whatsoever when it comes to the sound, whether we're using the FPGA core on the MiSTer side of things or NSO, but if you hear anything different, do leave me a comment down below. But the one thing that is a little bit difficult to get across in video, but you'll have to trust me, is the game just doesn't feel the same. When you're playing Super Mario 64 and MiSTer FPGA, the responsiveness, the frame rate, how the frame pacing comes out, feels exactly like playing it on real Nintendo 64 hardware, where you move over to the NSO version of the game. It just doesn't have the same feel, and that really is a cardinal sin. These games are here for you to play classics, and you want to play them in the exact same manner. What I'm assuming is on NSO, probably like 9 out of every 10 people that play Super Mario 64 maybe never played it back in the day, so they really wouldn't be aware of the differences. And I will say, at least on the upscaling side of things, sometimes it does make the game actually look worse. Going into this level right here with all of the water, all of that fog effect on the top is nicely blended. It has a good look. It really does feel about as close of an approximation as you can get to mist and fog on top of a lake with Nintendo 64 era hardware. And as we go under the water, it really has a nice look here. That soft image in the background, all of the textures kind of approximates what it would be like to actually be underwater. So that's a really effective look for Nintendo 64 back in the 90s, but if we move over to the NSO version, when you actually get that scaling, it just breaks the illusion. Yes, there is a fog layer, yes it is moving, but it is so flat, it kind of just feels like this weird aberration floating atop the water versus actually being part of the overall scene. And this is a situation in which, sure, you can get internal rendering resolution upscaling, and it can benefit a lot of games, but sometimes the effects definitely depend on the original resolution, and when you actually upscale them, it just basically breaks how it was made. The artist had a certain intent, and they were working to a certain resolution, so that is a situation in which it just doesn't look the same. And honestly, that really isn't an emulation issue whatsoever. It is just what you get when you upscale the graphics, so I can't really knock Nintendo or NSO for having done that. This is what most people want, playing the games but playing them in a higher resolution. You leave me a comment down below and you tell me, what do you care about when you're playing retro games? Getting the original feel or getting better graphics out of the same experience? For me, it's definitely across the board. For something like Nintendo 64, I want the original appearance. For stuff like PlayStation 1, I absolutely enhance it in DuckStation, and definitely PlayStation 2, I almost always have enhancements on. So really, when it comes to actually enhancing games, I sit in the middle of the fence, and depending on what console I am playing at that moment in time, that is where I'm going to fall on one side or the other. But take a look here at Mario taking his cap off, and pay attention to the NSO source on the left. You can see just how staggered it actually is in comparison to the source on the right on the Nintendo 64 core. You may have to rewind this a few times to see it, but you can absolutely see it's not rendering the same amount of frames at the same cadence. And if we move into the back of the castle here, for the most part this is working well, but once we actually go through the door, pay attention to how Mario actually animates and how the frames are drawn again. It is quick, but I'm going to play it more than once so you can see it. There's just a little bit of judder when it seems to be either loading the next area or doing something else. It could be paging in and out of RAM. It is not a smooth experience. It is one of those situations in which I can actually demonstrate it to you outside of gameplay. Now if we do the exact same thing on the Nintendo 64 core, watch Mario's motion when he goes through that door. It is absolutely smooth, just like the original console would have you see it. This is one of the fundamental differences, and this is going to happen in gameplay as well. You're going to get this weird frame pacing, you're going to get this judder, things are just not going to perform up to the task compared to real hardware, and that is going to affect your ability to play the game. It's not going to ruin the game in any way, shape, or form, it's just going to make it harder to experience. And on Nintendo 64, let's see on this capture if I can pull off the jump and sliding down the rest of the slide backwards. It's always a fun little trick. I just remember doing this back in the day and being so amused that you could get Mario to slide backwards down the ramp and actually cut some time off when you were doing it. Just one of those things, it is pure nostalgia. There's no reason to do it other than just to have fun, and I was able to do it here. Moving over to the NSO version of the game, even when you move the camera left and right, you can see that weird frame pacing, and it just basically takes you out of the game. And that can definitely cause performance issues as well, because you'll see here on the NSO side of things, trying the exact same jump, the cadence was off and the jump was just on the wrong frame and you fell, because that's actually a very easy jump to complete. And that's one of the things about the NSO version of the game. You're just going to miss some inputs, you're going to end up being late with some of your jumps, and it just is going to affect how you actually enjoy Super Mario 64. So honestly, if you have options to play this game, Ares emulation would be great, original hardware would be great, MiSTer FPGA would be great. Even the Super Mario 3D All-Stars version of the game would be, in my opinion, preferential to NSO. Please leave me a comment down below and tell me what your thoughts are. We're done, and I'll see you for the next comparison. And you can recommend some more down below. Bye-bye.